They called me the ghost, the mistake, the wolf without a scent. In a world governed by biology and instinct, I was invisible. I came to the Winter Solstice Ball to be forgotten, not to be wanted. But when the Vane Triplets walked in, the kings of the city, the monsters everyone feared, they didn't walk toward the heiresses, the beauties, or the alphas. They walked straight to me. He grabbed my waist, his brother grabbed my hand, and the third blocked the exit. Kavros. Smile, little wolf, and pretend you belong to us, or we're all dead. The ballroom smelled like sex, ambition, and expensive perfume. To Aurelia, it smelled like a headache. She stood near the heavy velvet curtains at the far edge of the room, making herself as small as possible. She was good at that. It was the only survival skill she had ever truly mastered: disappearing. In a room full of werewolves, biology was a loud, screaming thing. Alphas radiated power like heat from a furnace. Omegas smelled like vanilla, rain, blooming jasmine, siren calls designed to lure and trap. Even betas had a scent, steady and earthy like wood smoke. But Aurelia smelled like nothing. Null, void, defective. She took a sip of her water, her fingers trembling slightly against the cool glass. She shouldn't have come. She knew that. Her stepmother, Lady Corinne, had insisted. "It's the solstice, Aurelia," she had snapped this morning, yanking a brush through Aurelia's unruly brown hair. "Even the runts have to show their faces, so the pack knows we haven't drowned you in the river." A group of high-ranking she-wolves passed by, their silk gowns rustling like dry leaves. They were beautiful, glowing with health and status. One of them, a blonde Omega named Jessamine, paused. Her nose wrinkled. "Do you feel a draft?" Jessamine asked her friends, her voice loud enough to carry. She looked straight through Aurelia, her eyes glazed with mock confusion. "It feels empty over here, like there's a hole in the room." Her friends giggled, the sound sharp and brittle. "Don't be mean, Jess," one whispered, though she was smiling. "That's just Aurelia. You know, the ghost." "Oh," Jessamine said, her smile turning cruel. "I didn't see her. How could I? There's nothing there to sense." They moved on, leaving a trail of cloying floral scent in their wake. Aurelia stared at her shoes. They were scuffed at the toe, hidden beneath the hem of a gray dress that had seen better days. She didn't cry. She had stopped crying over things like this when she was 12. Tears implied she expected better. Tears implied she thought she deserved to be seen. "Just 1 hour," she promised herself. "Make an appearance, let the pack alpha see you're alive, and then slip out the kitchen entrance." She checked the large clock tower visible through the glass ceiling. 11:45 p.m. 15 minutes until the midnight toast. 15 minutes until the mating runs began. If she was still here when the clock struck 12, she would be trapped in the crush of bodies, the shift, the chaos. "Excuse me." A hand shoved her shoulder. Not gently. Aurelia stumbled, water sloshing over the rim of her glass and staining her gray silk dark. She looked up, heart hammering. Standing before her was Marcus, a mid-tier alpha who had been drinking too much whiskey. His face was flushed, his eyes glassy and unfocused. He wasn't looking at her face. He was looking at the wet spot on her dress, clinging to her chest. "Watch it, Null," he slurred. "You're taking up space meant for real wolves." "I'm sorry," Aurelia murmured, stepping back. You were just leaving," Marcus sneered. He took a step closer, crowding her against the cold glass of the window. The heat coming off him was suffocating, smelling of sour mash and aggression. "That's the problem with you, Aurelia. You take up air, you take up resources, and you don't give anything back. You can't even give a man a good time, can you? No heat, no scent, just empty." He reached out, his thick fingers grabbing a lock of her hair. He didn't pull, but the threat was there. "Maybe I should see if you scream like a real wolf." Aurelia froze. This was the instinct that had kept her alive. Don't fight. Don't run. Endure. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the swelling music of the orchestra. "Let me go." "Or what?" Marcus laughed. "Who's going to stop me? Who claims you, Aurelia? No one." He was right. That was the truest thing anyone had said all night. The double doors at the top of the grand staircase didn't open. They were thrown open. The sound echoed like a gunshot, silencing the orchestra in the middle of a measure. 500 heads turned as one. The silence that fell over the ballroom was heavy, absolute, and terrified. 3 men stood at the top of the stairs. They were identical in height, tall enough to dwarf the doorframe, but distinct in their violence. On the left was Silas. He was the muscle, broad-shouldered, and still as a statue. His hair was shaved close at the sides, long on top, and his eyes were the color of fractured ice. He scanned the room like a sniper looking for a target. On the right was Ryan. He was the charm, the beautiful lie. His suit was unbuttoned at the collar, revealing a throat tattooed with ancient runic script. He was smiling, but it was the kind of smile a wolf gives before it rips out a throat. His eyes were a burning, molten silver, and in the center was Kavros Vane, the head of the Triplet Alpha, the strategist. He wore black, absorbing the light around him. His face was sharp, angular, and utterly devoid of mercy. His eyes were gold, pure, liquid gold that seemed to burn through the fog of the room. The Vane Triplets, the rulers of the Western Territory. They weren't just alphas. They were an anomaly, a single soul split into 3 bodies. To cross one was to cross all 3. "They're here," someone whispered near Aurelia. "I thought they were at war in the north." "They were," another voice trembled. "They must have won." Kavros didn't look at the crowd. He looked at the council elders sitting on the raised dais at the far end of the room. The elders looked nervous. Good, Kavros thought. Let them sweat. "We have 10 minutes, Ryan murmured, his voice low enough that only his brothers could hear. He kept his smile fixed in place, waving lazily at a duchess who looked like she might faint. "The council is going to force the decree at midnight. If we don't present a mate, they seize the assets." "Let them try," Silas grunted. "I'll rip their heads off." "And lose the trust of the banks?" Kavros's voice was cool, clipped. "No, we do this legally. We need a distraction. We need a stalling tactic." "We need a mate," Ryan corrected, "or someone who looks like one." They descended the stairs. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, bodies pressing back to avoid touching them. No one wanted to accidentally challenge a Vane. Kavros's senses were overwhelmed. The room was a riot of desperation. Every unmarried Omega in the room was flaring her scent, trying to hook their attention. It was nauseating. Sweet vanilla, cloying rose, heavy musk. It felt like wading through syrup. "I can't breathe," Silas growled, rubbing his chest. "Too much. It's too much." "Focus," Kavros commanded. "We need someone neutral, someone who won't think this is real. If we pick a highborn, her family will expect a marriage contract by morning." "We need a nobody," Ryan said, his eyes scanning the crowd. "A wallflower, someone desperate enough to agree, but insignificant enough to discard when the council backs down." They reached the floor. The circle of empty space around them moved with them. Kavros scanned the room, dismissing women instantly. Too ambitious, too political, too scent-heavy. Then he stopped. In the far corner, near the drafty windows, there was a hole in the sensory map, a blank spot. Visually, there was a woman. She was small, pressed against the glass, dressed in gray. A drunk alpha was crowding her, his hand tangled in her hair. She looked terrified, but she wasn't making a sound. But olfactorily, she didn't exist. Kavros flared his nostrils. Nothing, no fear scent, no arousal, no distinct Omega signature. She was a void. "Do you see her?" Kavros asked. Ryan followed his gaze. "The Null? The one Marcus is harassing?" "She has no scent," Kavros said. "She won't trigger the mating frenzy. She's safe." "She's perfect," Silas added, his eyes narrowing on Marcus's hand. "And she looks like she needs saving." "We aren't heroes, Silas," Kavros warned. "No," Ryan grinned, adjusting his cuffs. "But tonight we can pretend." Aurelia was trying to pry Marcus's fingers off her hair without angering him further when the air in the ballroom changed. It wasn't a sound. It was a pressure drop. The atmosphere suddenly felt heavy, charged with ozone and lightning. Marcus froze. His drunken sneer vanished, replaced by the instinctual pallor of a prey animal, sensing a predator. He dropped her hair and took a stumbling step back. I didn't know," Marcus stammered, looking over Aurelia's shoulder. "I didn't know she was yours." Aurelia frowned, rubbing her scalp. "Mine?" She turned around, and her heart stopped. They were mountains. That was her first thought. Just sheer, vertical walls of muscle and darkness. 3 of them. They stood in a semicircle around her, effectively walling her off from the rest of the party. Up close, they were devastating. The one on the left, Silas, smelled like wet earth and gunmetal. The one on the right, Ryan, smelled like spiced rum and smoke. And the one in the center, Kavros. He smelled like cold winter air and absolute authority. They were looking at her, not through her, not past her, at her. For For the first time in her life, Aurelia felt entirely, terrifyingly visible. "Is this insect bothering you?" The one with the silver eyes, Ryan, asked. His voice was light, musical, but his eyes were fixed on Marcus with lethal intent. Aurelia opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She nodded, then shook her head, then just stood there trembling. "Leave," Kavros said to Marcus. He didn't shout, he didn't growl. He simply spoke the word, and it carried the weight of an execution order. Marcus didn't hesitate. He scrambled backward, tripping over his own feet, and vanished into the crowd. Aurelia let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching her empty water glass like a weapon. I should go." She tried to step sideways, to slip through the gap between the center alpha and the window. Kavros moved. He didn't grab her. He just shifted his weight, blocking her path with his body. He was so close she could feel the heat radiating off his chest. He looked down at her, his golden eyes analyzing her face, her neck, her hands. "You have no scent," he stated. It wasn't a question. Aurelia flinched. "I know, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be here." "It makes you invisible," he continued, ignoring her apology. "To everyone else in this room, you are a ghost." "I know," she repeated, shame burning her cheeks. "Please let me pass." "No," Kavros said. Aurelia looked up, startled. "What?" "We need a ghost," Ryan said, stepping closer on her right. He leaned in, his nose brushing the shell of her ear. Aurelia shivered, a violent tremor that had nothing to do with the cold. "We need someone to hide behind." "I don't understand," Aurelia stammered. Her pulse was roaring in her ears. "The council demands we choose a mate tonight," Silas rumbled from her left, closing the cage. "Or they strip us of our territory." Kavros took a step forward, forcing Aurelia back until her spine pressed against the cold glass of the window. She was trapped between the blizzard outside and the firestorm in front of her. "We cannot choose a real mate," Kavros said softly. "It would cause a war between the families. We need a decoy, someone neutral, someone who doesn't matter. Someone who doesn't matter." The words stung, even though she knew they were true. "You want me to pretend," Kavros finished. He reached out. His hand, large and warm and scarred, hovered near her waist. He didn't touch her yet. He waited. "For 1 hour," Kavros said, his voice dropping to a husky, compelling register. "You pretend you are ours. You dance with us. You let us mark you with our scent. And in exchange," he paused, glancing at the crowd that was watching them with bated breath. "In exchange," Ryan whispered, "we make every person in this room who ever looked through you regret it. We make you the queen of the solstice." Aurelia looked at Kavros's hand. She looked at the crowd. She saw Jessamine watching, mouth open in shock. She saw Lady Corinne, pale and trembling. She saw the world that had rejected her for 22 years. She knew she should say no. These men were dangerous. They were using her. Once the clock struck 1, they would discard her, and she would be the ghost again. But for 1 hour, she could be real. 1 hour, she whispered. 1 hour, Kavros promised. But you have to sell it, little wolf. You have to make them believe you've captured the monsters. What do I have to do? Kavros smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was a smile of victory. Just breathe, he said. And then he closed the distance. The contact was electric. Kavros's hand slammed onto her waist, pulling her flush against his hard body. The shock of it made Aurelia gasp, her hands flying up to rest on his chest for balance. Under her palms, his heart wasn't beating fast. It was slow. Thump, 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 like a war drum. "Eyes up," Kavros commanded softly. "Don't look at your feet, look at me." She lifted her chin. His golden eyes were mesmerizing, swirling with flecks of amber and green. "Ryan, take her hand. Silas, watch the perimeter." Ryan laced his fingers through hers. His skin was hot, dry, calloused. He brought her knuckles to his lips, kissing them while maintaining eye contact with the watching crowd. A collective gasp rippled through the room. "They're watching," Ryan murmured against her skin. "They think we've lost our minds. A Vane Triplet courting a Null." "Let them stare," Silas grunted, moving to stand behind her, his chest pressing against her back. Aurelia was surrounded, enveloped. For a woman who had never been touched, never been held, never been wanted. This was sensory overload. She was drowning in them. The smell of winter air, smoke, and wet earth filled her lungs, chasing away the stale scent of the ballroom. "Walk with us," Kavros said. to the center of the floor. I can't dance, Aurelia panicked. You don't need to dance, Kavros said, guiding her forward. You just need to let us worship you. They moved, and the world moved around them. As they walked toward the center of the ballroom, Aurelia felt the shift. People weren't looking through her anymore. They were staring at her. With envy, with confusion, with fear. She wasn't the ghost. She was the center of the Vane Triplets universe. They reached the middle of the floor, just as the orchestra hesitantly began a waltz. Kavros spun her. He was strong, leading her with an ease that made her clumsiness vanish. Ryan cut in seamlessly, spinning her out and pulling her back against his chest. Silas was there to catch her when she dipped. It was a performance, a lie. But then Kavros pulled her close for the final dip. His face was inches from hers. The music swelled, the crowd blurred. He leaned down, his lips brushing the sensitive skin of her neck, right over her pulse point. This was part of the act, the fake marking. He was supposed to nuzzle her, leave his scent on her skin to warn off other males and pull away. He inhaled, and then he froze. Kavros's entire body went rigid against hers. His hand on her waist tightened to the point of pain. Aurelia felt it too. A spark, a strange, hot snap of electricity that arced from his skin to hers, zipping down her spine and settling low in her belly. Kavros pulled back, but he didn't let go. He stared at her, his golden eyes wide, the pupils blown so large they were almost black. The cool, calculating strategist was gone. In his place was something wild, something stunned. He leaned in again, inhaling deeply, desperately, right at the curve of her throat. Kavros? Ryan asked, stepping closer, his playful smile fading. What are you doing? That's enough. You're selling it too hard. Kavros didn't answer. He looked at his brother, then back at Aurelia. His voice when he spoke was a ragged, broken whisper that the microphones in the room didn't catch. But Aurelia heard loud and clear. You're not scentless, Kavros breathed, looking at her like she was a ghost who had just come back to life. Aurelia's heart hammered against her ribs. What? Kavros's hand trembled as it slid up to cup her jaw. You smell, he whispered. Like us. Silence. Thunder rolls outside, shaking the glass walls. The music didn't stop, but for Aurelia, the world had ground to a terrifying halt. Kavros Vane was still holding her. His face was buried in the curve of her neck, his breath coming in shallow, ragged hitches against her skin. He wasn't moving. He wasn't pulling away to smirk at the crowd as he had promised. He was frozen, like a man who had just stepped on a landmine and heard the click. Kavros? Ryan's voice was a sharp hiss, barely audible over the swelling violins. Ryan stepped closer, his playful smile straining at the edges. To the audience, the hundreds of envious eyes watching from the perimeter, it looked like the brothers were simply closing ranks around their new conquest, a display of possessiveness. But Aurelia felt the difference. The air around them had turned brittle. Kavros pulled back slowly. It was a physical effort, his muscles trembling as he fought his own body. When his eyes met Aurelia's, the gold in them was swirling violently, bleeding into the white. He looked drugged. He looked furious. What did you do? Kavros whispered. The accusation was low, dangerous. What are you wearing? Nothing, Aurelia stammered, her hands still trapped against his chest. I told you, I don't... Liar, he snarled softly. Ryan grabbed Aurelia's arm, his grip tight enough to bruise. Brother, the council is watching. Smile. I can't, Kavros gritted out. She smells like ozone, like the storm, like me. Ryan frowned, his silver eyes darting to Aurelia's face. He leaned in, ostensibly to whisper a romantic nothing into her ear, but in reality, he inhaled sharply near her temple. Aurelia flinched. She expected him to recoil. She expected him to laugh and say Kavros was hallucinating. Instead, Ryan stiffened. His charm evaporated instantly. The heat radiating off him spiked, hot and suffocating. Smoke, Ryan breathed, his eyes widening. She smells like wood smoke and whiskey. That's your scent, Silas rumbled from behind her. The third brother, the silent mountain, moved closer. He didn't care about the crowd. He didn't care about the council. He reached out, his massive hand covering Aurelia's bare shoulder. His thumb rubbed against her collarbone, rough and testing. Iron, Silas murmured, his voice vibrating through her back. And blood. Aurelia's heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. This wasn't possible. For 22 years, healers had told her she was a null, a genetic dead end. She had no pheromones. She was biological static. I don't smell like anything, she whispered, panic rising in her throat. You're imagining it. It's the adrenaline or the champagne. I know the difference between champagne and a mating signature, Kavros snapped. But he didn't let go. If anything, he pulled her closer. The waltz forced them to move. Kavros spun her, but the motion wasn't graceful anymore. It was predatory. He passed her to Ryan, the transition sharp and possessive. Ryan caught her, his hand splaying wide over her lower back, his fingers digging into the silk of her dress. "Who sent you?" Ryan asked, smiling for the cameras while his eyes bored into hers with lethal intensity. "Was it the Northern Pack? Did they cloak you?" "No one sent me," Aurelia hissed, trying to keep her footing as he whirled her around. "I was drinking water in the corner. You came to me." "Convenient," Ryan drawled, but his nose drifted to her hair again, inhaling greedily. "God, why does it smell so good? It's not just smoke, it's something else. Something sweet underneath, like burning sugar." "We need to leave," Silas stated. He wasn't dancing. He was standing still in the moving crowd, a rock in a river, forcing couples to flow around him. "Now, before I lose control and shift right here." Kavros nodded, his strategist mask slamming back into place. But Aurelia saw the cracks. She saw the sweat beating at his temple. She saw the way his hand shook as he reached for her again. "The act is over," Kavros announced to his brothers. "We take her to the estate. We verify the signature." "And if she's a spy?" Ryan asked, his voice light but his eyes dark. "Then we kill her," Kavros said. He looked at Aurelia. There was no kindness in his face, only a terrifying raw hunger. "Smile, little wolf," he ordered. "You're coming home with us." Getting out of the ballroom was a gauntlet. Kavros kept his arm around her waist, a vice grip that held her upright when her knees threatened to buckle. Ryan walked on her right, Silas on her left. They formed a phalanx, a wall of pure alpha aggression that parted the crowd faster than words ever could. "Where are they going? Is he taking her already? It's not even midnight." The whispers followed them like a swarm of bees. Aurelia saw Lady Corinne's face in the crowd, mouth agape, eyes wide with shock. For once, her stepmother saw her, but Aurelia didn't feel triumph. She felt like a lamb being escorted by wolves to a very private slaughter. "Keep walking," Kavros murmured against her hair. "Don't look at them. Don't stop." "You're hurting me," Aurelia whispered. Kavros's grip loosened instantly, his fingers stroking the silk at her waist in a subconscious apology. He didn't seem to realize he was doing it. That scared her more than the violence. They reached the heavy oak doors of the exit. The cold air from the vestibule hit them, biting and sharp. The noise of the party faded, replaced by the howling wind outside. A valet scrambled forward, holding coats. "Your Highnesses, the car is—" "Bring it around," Silas barked. "Now." As they waited in the drafty hallway, the silence between them stretched, taut and vibrating. Aurelia wrapped her arms around herself, shivering. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving only the cold reality of her situation. She had agreed to a fake date. She was currently being kidnapped by the most powerful alphas in the territory because they thought she smelled like them. "I want to go home," she said, her voice small. Ryan turned to her. He braced one hand against the wall, leaning down until they were eye to eye. The charming mask was gone. He looked wild. "You are going home," Ryan said softly. "You're going to our home, until we figure out how a Null suddenly smells like the best thing I've ever tasted." "I'm not a spy," she insisted, tears pricking her eyes. "I'm nobody." "Nobody doesn't make a triple alpha lose his mind in the middle of a waltz," Kavros said from behind her. He stepped close, his chest brushing her back. "Nobody doesn't make my heart sink to theirs." Aurelia stilled. "What?" Kavros didn't answer. He reached out, his hand hovering over her neck, over the pulse point that was beating frantically. Thump, 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 thump. He didn't touch her. He just let his hand rest in the air, feeling the rhythm. "It's synced," Silas noted, staring at Kavros's hand. "Look at the tremor." The valet pulled the black SUV up to the curb, the doors unlocked with a heavy clunk. "Get in," Kavros ordered. Aurelia looked at the open door. It looked like the mouth of a cave. "If I get in that car," she said, finding a scrap of courage she didn't know she had. "I'm not pretending anymore, am I?" Kavros looked at her. The gold in his eyes flared, bright and consuming. "No," he said. "The game ended the moment I smelled you." He placed a hand on the small of her back and pushed. The drive was silent. The elevator ride up to the penthouse of the Vane Tower was silent. The only sound was breathing. 4 people, breathing in a syncopated rhythm that felt unnervingly intimate. The penthouse was a fortress of glass and steel, overlooking the snow-choked city. It was beautiful, cold and masculine. It smelled like them. Leather, espresso, and that underlying scent of ozone and earth. As soon as the elevator doors slid open, the dynamic exploded. Kavros marched into the room, tearing off his suit jacket and throwing it onto a leather couch. Lock the doors, Silas. Check the perimeter for hex bags. On it, Ryan said, moving fluidly through the room, sniffing the air, checking corners. Aurelia stood by the elevator, hugging her arms. Can I please have a glass of water? No, Kavros said, turning on her. You don't put anything in your mouth until we know what you are. He stalked toward her. The space in the room seemed to shrink. Sit. He pointed to a solitary armchair in the center of the room. Aurelia sat. She felt like a doll being positioned in a dollhouse. Kavros stood over her, hands on his hips. Silas took up a position by the door, arms crossed, watching her with unblinking intensity. Ryan circled the chair, moving like a shark. Let's assume for a moment you're telling the truth, Kavros began, his voice clinical, though his eyes were still burning. You're Aurelia Vance, 22, Omega, classified as a null since birth, correct? Yes, Aurelia whispered. So why? Kavros leaned down, hands gripping the arms of her chair, trapping her. Did my wolf try to claim you on the dance floor? I don't know, Aurelia cried. Maybe you're sick. Maybe it's the season. We don't get sick, Silas grunted. Ryan stopped circling. He stood behind her chair, leaning over the back, his head dipped down, his nose grazing her hair again. It's getting stronger, Ryan murmured. In the car it was faint. Now? It's filling the room. It's intoxicating. He reached out, his fingers brushing against her neck. Aurelia gasped. A spark, literal visible static electricity, snapped between his skin and hers. A tiny blue arc of light. Ryan jerked his hand back, hissing. Did you see that? Kavros stared at the red mark appearing on Aurelia's skin where the spark had hit. Static! That wasn't static, Ryan said, looking at his fingertips. They were trembling. That was feedback. Biological feedback. Impossible, Kavros muttered. Feedback only happens between... He trailed off. He couldn't say it. Between fated mates, Silas finished for him. The room went dead silent. The wind howled against the glass walls, but inside, the air was vacuum sealed. No! Aurelia shook her head. No, I'm a null. I can't be fated to anyone, especially not three of you. It's a trick, Kavros said, pacing away. He ran a hand through his hair, messing up the perfect style. It has to be a trick, a spell. Someone is projecting a false bond onto her to manipulate us. Who has that kind of power? Ryan asked. The witches of the East? The council? Kavros spun around. We need to test it. Aurelia shrank back in the chair. Test it how? Kavros looked at her. He looked at his brothers. A silent communication passed between them, a terrifying telepathic agreement. If it's a spell, Kavros said, walking back toward her. It relies on proximity and surface chemicals. It mimics the bond, but it can't replicate the pain. Pain? Aurelia's voice rose an octave. The rejection test, Silas said quietly. Kavros stopped in front of her. He crouched down so they were eye level. For the first time, he didn't look angry. He looked terrified and desperate. If we are fated, Kavros explained, his voice low, and I give you a direct command to leave, it will hurt. It will feel like your soul is tearing. And if it's a trick, Aurelia asked, then you'll just walk out the door, Kavros said, and you'll be free. Aurelia looked at him. She looked at the door. Freedom. That was what she wanted. To go back to being invisible. To be safe. Do it, she whispered. Kavros took a deep breath. He closed his eyes for a second, gathering his will. When he opened them, the gold was hard, cold, and absolute. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. He pushed his alpha authority into the air, a physical wave of pressure that made the glass rattle in the frames. Aurelia, he said. The name vibrated in her bones. I reject you, Kavros said, the words heavy as stones. Leave us. Silence followed the command. Aurelia blinked. She waited for the relief. She waited for her legs to obey, to stand up and walk toward the elevator. She stood up. See? Kavros exhaled, his shoulders sagging. It's a trick. She's fine. Ryan let out a dark, humorless laugh. Thank God. For a second there, I thought... Aurelia took a step toward the door, and then she screamed. It wasn't a sound of fear. It was a sound of agony. It hit her like a physical blow to the chest, a tearing, burning, ripping sensation that started in her heart and spiderwebbed through her veins. It felt like someone had hooked a chain to her ribs and was dragging her backward while her body tried to move forward. She collapsed. "Aurelia!" She hit the floor hard, clutching her chest, gasping for air that wouldn't come, her vision blurred, gray spots dancing in front of her eyes. The pain was blinding. It was absolute. It was the feeling of being severed from something vital. "Make it stop!" she sobbed, curling into a ball. "Make it stop, please!" "Kavros!" Silas roared. "Reverse it! Look at her!" Kavros was already moving. He dropped to his knees beside her, his face pale, his eyes wide with horror. He reached for her, but his hands hovered, afraid to make it worse. "I didn't think," Kavros stammered. "I didn't think it was real." "It's real!" Ryan shouted, dropping beside them. He grabbed Aurelia's hand. The moment Ryan touched her, the pain receded slightly, just enough for Aurelia to draw a breath. She clung to him, digging her nails into his wrist, seeking the anchor. "Breathe," Ryan commanded gently, stroking her hair. "Kavros, fix it. Now." Kavros looked at the woman writhing on his floor, the woman he had just tried to discard, the woman who was currently dying because he had told her to leave. He realized then that his strategy, his logic, his plans, they were all ash. He grabbed her face between his hands. His touch was fire, but it was the only thing that stopped the cold. "Aurelia," Kavros said, his voice fierce, "look at me." She opened her eyes. They were swimming with tears, but beneath the brown there was a flash of something else, a flash of gold. "I take it back," Kavros swore, his forehead resting against hers. You stay with us." The pain vanished instantly. In its place, a rush of endorphins flooded her system, warm, heavy, and sweet. Aurelia slumped against him, exhausted, trembling, her heart beating in a slow, heavy rhythm that matched the man holding her. Thump, 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 thump. Silence reclaimed the room. Kavros pulled back slowly to look at her. He didn't look relieved. He looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff he had just realized he had to jump off. He looked at his brothers. Silas was staring at Aurelia's neck. Ryan was staring at her mouth. "It wasn't a trick," Kavros whispered, his voice trembling with the enormity of the mistake he had almost made. He traced the tear track on her cheek with his thumb. "The bond isn't fake, Aurelia." He leaned in, his lips hovering inches from hers, the air between them crackling with the scent of ozone and inevitability. "And neither is the danger." Kavros's eyes shifted to the glass window behind her, his pupils contracted. "Because if you're ours," he said, his voice dropping to a terrifying dead calm, "then the thing hunting us." He paused. The lights in the penthouse flickered. Once, twice, then died completely. It just found you too. The darkness wasn't empty. It was heavy, pressing against Aurelia's eardrums like deep water. "Down!" It was Silas who moved first. The massive alpha didn't just drop. He tackled Aurelia, his body becoming a human shield over hers as the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse exploded inward. Shards of glass rained down like jagged hail, bouncing off Silas's broad back. The wind roared into the room, carrying snow and the scent of something wrought, sweet, and chemical. "Perimeter breached!" Ryan yelled, his voice sounding from the darkness to their left. A flash of gunfire lit up the room, strobe light bursts revealing figures rappelling in from the storm. They weren't just men. They were clad in tactical gear, faces covered by smooth, featureless black masks. "Hunters," Kavros snarled. His voice was close, right beside Aurelia's ear. "Silas, get her to the vault. Ryan, suppressive fire. I'll clear the path." "I can walk," Aurelia gasped, trying to scramble out from under Silas. The floor was freezing, covered in snow and glass. "No, you can't," Silas grunted. He hauled her up with one arm, effortlessly clamping her to his chest like she weighed nothing. "Hold on." He didn't run. He charged. Silas moved like a tank, crashing through the overturned furniture. Aurelia buried her face in his jacket, smelling the iron tang of his blood mixed with the wet earth scent of his fear. Fear, not for himself, for her. "Target the female!" a voice shouted from the wind, mechanized, distorted. "Secure the asset!" The asset? Aurelia's heart stuttered. They weren't here for the Vane brothers. They were here for the Null. "Over my dead body," Ryan laughed, a dark, manic sound. Blue fire erupted from Ryan's hands, not a gun, but raw thermal energy. He was a firecaster. Aurelia watched in horror and awe over Silas's shoulder as Ryan hurled a sphere of blue flame at the intruders. It hit a masked figure, throwing him back out into the storm. Move, Kavros commanded. He was at the far wall, ripping a heavy tapestry aside to reveal a steel panel. He punched a code into the keypad. Get her inside! Silas threw himself through the opening just as bullets chewed up the drywall behind them. Ryan dove in next, sliding across the metal floor. Kavros followed, slamming his hand on the emergency seal. The panic room, or the vault, as Kavros called it, was stark. Concrete walls, a rack of weapons, a single cot, and a bank of monitors showing static. The only light came from the red emergency strips along the floor, casting them all in the color of blood. Silas set Aurelia down on the cot. His hands lingered on her arms for a second, checking for injuries, before he pulled away as if burned. Is she hurt? Kavros demanded, pacing the small space like a caged tiger. He was bleeding from a cut above his eye, the blood running down his cheek like a war paint. I'm fine, Aurelia said, though her voice shook. She pulled her knees to her chest, trying to stop. The trembling, Kavros, you're bleeding! I don't care, Kavros snapped. He turned on her, his golden eyes blazing in the red light. You said you were a Null. You said you were invisible. I am, Aurelia cried, defensive anger flaring to mask her terror. I've been invisible my whole life. I didn't ask for this. Those weren't ordinary assassins, Aurelia, Ryan said. He was leaning against the door, reloading a handgun. His playfulness was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating lethality. They were using Null seeker tech. They knew you were there before we did. That's impossible, Aurelia whispered. Why would anyone hunt a Null? We have no value. We can't breed strong pups. We can't track. You aren't a Null, Kavros said, stopping his pacing to stand directly in front of her. The proximity was overwhelming. In the small room, his scent, ozone and winter air, was thick enough to taste. You're a latent Omega, and a powerful one. Latent? Dormant, Kavros corrected harshly. Suppressed. Someone blocked your scent, Aurelia. Someone hid you on purpose, and tonight the block broke. Aurelia stared at him. Blocked? By who? My parents are dead. Lady Corin hates me. We'll find out, Silas growled from the corner. He was stripping off his ruined jacket, revealing a black t-shirt strained across his chest. But right now, we have a bigger problem. What? Aurelia asked. Us, Kavros said. He looked at her, his expression twisting with conflict. He wanted to touch her. Aurelia could feel it, a physical pull like gravity, dragging them together. The bond she had felt earlier wasn't fading. In the high adrenaline confinement of the vault, it was screaming. The bond is reacting to the danger, Kavros explained, his voice tight. Our wolves think you're in peril. They want to claim you to protect you, and if we don't get away from you... He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Aurelia looked at Ryan. His silver eyes were dilated, watching her throat. She looked at Silas. He was gripping the back of a chair so hard the metal was bending. You're afraid you'll hurt me, Aurelia realized. We're afraid we won't stop, Ryan whispered. We're holding on by a thread, sweetheart. And you smell like... salvation. Then let me go, Aurelia said. It was the hardest thing she'd ever said. She didn't want to go. She wanted to crawl into Kavros's arms and never leave. But she saw the strain on their faces. If I'm the target, I'm putting you in danger. Let me leave. I can disappear again. No! The word came from all three of them at once, a harmonic growl that shook the floor. Kavros stepped closer, invading her space. You don't get it. You don't leave. Not now. Not ever. You're ours. I can't be yours. Aurelia stood up, meeting his glare. I don't know you. An hour ago, I was a prop to you, a fake date. You can't just claim me because of biology. It's not just biology, Kavros argued, grabbing her wrists. His skin was fever hot. It's survival. If you walk out that door, the hunters will take you. Do you know what they do to rare Omegas? Do you want to find out? I'd rather take my chances with them than be a prisoner here, she lied. Kavros froze. His eyes narrowed. A prisoner? Aren't I? Aurelia challenged, her breath hitching. I can't leave. I can't speak. I have to sit here and let you decide my fate. That sounds like a prison to me. Kavros stared at her. The anger in his face slowly morphed into something else, something sharper. You think we want to control you? He asked softly. You're alphas, Aurelia spat. That's all you know how to do. Kavros let go of her wrists. He took a step back, raising his hands in surrender. It was a calculated move, a test. Fine, Kavros said. The door is sealed from the inside. Ryan, give her the code. Ryan blinked. Kavros, are you insane? Give her the code, Kavros repeated, never breaking eye contact with Aurelia. If she thinks she's a prisoner, let her open the door. Let her walk out into the storm where the kill squad is waiting. Ryan hesitated, then sighed. 7, 7, 3, 4. Silence stretched in the red-lit room. Aurelia looked at the heavy steel door. She had the code. She could leave. She could prove a point. But her feet wouldn't move. Not because of fear of the hunters, but because, standing there in the red light, looking at the 3 men who had just risked their lives to save her, she didn't want to leave. She looked at Kavros. He was watching her with a terrifying intensity. He knew she wouldn't go. Aurelia faltered. She sank back down onto the cot, covering her face with her hands. I hate you. I know, Kavros whispered. He walked back to her, but this time he didn't grab her. He knelt before her, forcing her to look down at him. A submission posture, but weaponized. Hate us all you want, Aurelia, Kavros said, reaching out to gently pull her hands away from her face. But stay alive. Time lost meaning in the vault. It might have been hours. It might have been minutes. Ryan was monitoring the surveillance feeds, hacking into the building's damaged security grid. Silas was cleaning his weapons, the rhythmic snick-click of assembly filling the silence. Aurelia sat on the cot, watching Kavros. He was sitting against the far wall, eyes closed, head tipped back. The cut on his forehead had stopped bleeding, but it looked angry. He looked exhausted. Without thinking, Aurelia reached for the first aid kit Silas had left on the floor. She took out an antiseptic wipe and a bandage. She walked over to Kavros. Silas stopped cleaning his gun. Ryan paused his typing. They watched her. Aurelia knelt beside Kavros. He didn't open his eyes. Go away, Aurelia, he murmured. I'm trying to keep my distance. Hold still, she said softly. She reached out and dabbed the cut on his brow. Kavros hissed, his eyes snapping open. Gold met brown. It stings, she whispered. I know. It's not the alcohol. Kavros grit out. It's you! Aurelia froze. Am I repulsive? No. Kavros let out a ragged breath. God, no, you're a torch and I'm covered in gasoline. Being this close to you, it takes everything I have not to take you right here on this concrete floor. Aurelia's breath hitched. The raw honesty of it, the vulnerability beneath the alpha command, struck her harder than any order. Why fight it? She asked. The words slipped out before she could check them. Kavros looked at her, searching her face. Because you don't know who we are, Aurelia. You know the Vane Triplets, the kings, the monsters. I see a man who is bleeding because he jumped through a window for me, she countered. She placed the bandage over his cut, her fingers lingering on his temple. Kavros leaned into her touch. Just for a second. He closed his eyes, and the harsh lines of his face smoothed out. He looked young. He looked burdened. We aren't good men, Kavros whispered. We've done terrible things to keep this territory. If you bond to us, the blood on our hands gets on yours. Maybe I don't mind getting my hands dirty, Aurelia said softly. Kavros's eyes opened. He looked at her with a mix of wonder and devastation. He reached up, his hand circling her wrist, his thumb pressing into her pulse point. You have no idea what you're saying. Then tell me, she challenged. Tell me the truth. No more games. Why did you really pick me tonight? Was it just chance? Kavros looked at Ryan. Ryan nodded once, grimly. It wasn't chance, Kavros admitted. We picked you because you were a Null. We thought you were safe, but there was a file. A file? Intelligence we bought last week, Kavros said. Rumors of a hidden heiress, a child of the deposed Southern Alpha bloodline hidden in plain sight to protect her from the purge 20 years ago. Aurelia pulled her hand back. The Southern Alpha? The tyrant king? Yes, Kavros said. They said his daughter was dead, but the rumors said she was hidden, masked by a spell that stripped her scent. Aurelia stood up, backing away. No, that's a fairy tale. I'm Aurelia Vance. My father was a baker. Your father was a baker, Silas said, speaking up from the corner. But who was your mother? Aurelia opened her mouth to answer Corinne, but the word died on her tongue. Corinne was her stepmother, her real mother. She had died in childbirth. That was the story. I don't know, Aurelia whispered. The hunters know, Ryan said, pointing to the screen. That's why they're here, Aurelia. They aren't trying to kidnap a random Omega. They're trying to extinguish a bloodline. They're trying to kill the true queen, Kavros finished. The room seemed to spin. Aurelia felt sick. I'm not a queen, she denied, shaking her head. I'm nobody. I'm a fake date. You were, Kavros stood up, the predator returning. But now you're the most dangerous woman in the city. We have to move, Ryan announced suddenly. They're cutting through the outer door. The vault won't hold them for more than 5 minutes. Where do we go? Aurelia asked, panic rising again. You said we're trapped. There's a secondary exit, Kavros said. The service tunnels, but we have to go through them to get to it. He gestured to the monitors. The hallway outside the penthouse was swarming with black-clad figures. We have to fight, Silas said, standing up and racking the slide of a shotgun. Ryan, take point. Kavros, you have the girl. I can fight, Aurelia said, though she had no idea how. No. Kavros grabbed a heavy Kevlar vest from the rack and shoved it into her arms. Put this on. You stay behind me. You don't make a sound. If I tell you to run, you run. Do you understand? Kavros, do you understand? He roared, his control fraying. Yes. She pulled the vest on. It smelled like him. Kavros grabbed a sleek black assault rifle. He looked at his brothers. No mercy, Kavros ordered. None, Ryan agreed, his hands lighting up with blue fire again. Kavros turned to Aurelia. He grabbed the back of her neck and pulled her forehead to his. A hard, desperate bump. If we get out of this, Kavros growled, I'm going to tell you everything, the lie, the file, the bond, everything. Promise, she breathed. I swear it on my blood. He let her go and punched the release on the door. Go. They burst out of the vault. The hallway was a war zone. Ryan was a blur of motion, throwing fire that incinerated the carpet and the men standing on it. Silas was a hammer, using the butt of his shotgun to crack skulls when the ammo ran dry. Kavros kept one hand on Aurelia's vest, dragging her through the smoke. Clear left, Kavros shouted, firing 3 precise shots. 3 bodies dropped. They reached the service elevator. Kavros jammed the button. Come on, he muttered. Come on. The doors pinged. They started to slide open, but they weren't empty. Standing inside the elevator was a single man. He wore a white suit, pristine amidst the chaos. He held a cane topped with a silver wolf's head. Aurelia stopped. She knew that cane. She had seen it in history books. The man smiled. It was a cold, reptilian smile. Hello, Aurelia, the man said. His voice was smooth, cultured, and terrifying. Daddy has been looking everywhere for you. Kavros stiffened. He raised his rifle. Don't, the man in white said, lifting a finger. Kavros choked. He dropped the rifle, clutching his throat. Ryan fell to his knees, gasping, the fire in his hands dying out. Silas stumbled, crashing into the wall. Blood magic, Kavros rasped, falling to one knee. He controls the blood. The man in the white suit stepped out of the elevator. He ignored the alphas writhing on the floor. He walked straight to Aurelia. She couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. You look just like her, the man said, reaching out to stroke Aurelia's cheek. His hand was ice cold. My little Null, my little secret. He leaned in close, so close she could smell the decay on his breath. Did they tell you why you have no scent, my dear? Aurelia shook her head, tears streaming down her face. It wasn't to hide you, he whispered, his eyes gleaming with madness. It was to keep you from eating them. Aurelia froze. Eating them? The man smiled, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too long. You aren't an Omega, Aurelia, he said, his voice echoing in the sudden dead silence of the hallway. He looked at Kavros, who was watching helplessly from the floor. You're an Alpha Eater. The man snapped his fingers. Then, the hunger woke up. The hallway was freezing, not the cold of the blizzard outside, but the unnatural, absolute zero of a grave. Aurelia stood paralyzed. The words Alpha Eater echoed in her mind, bouncing off the steel walls. The man in white, her father, smiled. It was a terrifying expression, full of pride and malice. He took a step toward her, his cane clicking against the floor. You feel it, don't you? He whispered. The emptiness, the hunger, it's been starving for 22 years. Aurelia did feel it. It started in her stomach, a hollow, gnawing ache that wasn't about food. It was a vacuum, a black hole opening up inside her chest. She looked down at Kavros, who was writhing on the floor, clutching his throat as invisible hands strangled him. She looked at Ryan and Silas, their immense strength rendered useless by the blood magic pinning them down. They were bright. That was the only way she could describe it. Even through her tears, she saw them not just as men, but as blazing bonfires of energy. Gold, silver, iron. and she was so, so cold. "Take it," a voice in the back of her head whispered. "Take the heat, take the life." "No," Aurelia gasped, clutching her chest. "Don't fight it," the man in white urged. "Drain them, Aurelia, consume them, that is what you were made for. Kill the Vane brothers, and I will set you free." Kavros made a choking sound. His golden eyes met hers. They weren't pleading, they were resigned. He thought this was it. He thought she was the weapon. "I am not a weapon," Aurelia thought furiously. "I am not a monster." She didn't reach for Kavros. She reached for the magic. She didn't know how she did it. She just pulled. She grabbed the invisible, suffocating pressure in the room, the blood magic that smelled like rot, and she inhaled it. The effect was instantaneous. The man in white staggered back, gasping as his cane flew out of his hand. "What?" The pressure lifted. The invisible hands vanished. Kavros sucked in a desperate, ragged breath. The color rushed back into Ryan's face. Silas roared, the sound returning to his lungs. "Now!" Kavros rasped, his voice wrecked. He didn't attack the man. He grabbed Aurelia. "The chute!" Kavros yelled. Silas shoulder-checked the service elevator doors, knocking them off their track. Behind the car was a dark, gaping shaft, the laundry chute. "Jump!" Bullets sparked against the wall as the man in white recovered, pulling a silver pistol from his suit. Kavros didn't wait. He wrapped his arms around Aurelia, tucking her head into his chest, and threw himself into the darkness. Ryan and Silas followed, their bodies shielding them from the gunfire above. They fell. The fall was short, brutal, and ended in a pile of dirty linens and industrial canvas. They landed in the laundry collection bay of the sub-basement. Dust and lint exploded into the air. "Clear!" Silas shouted, rolling to his feet instantly, weapon raised. "Check Kavros!" Ryan wheezed, crawling over the pile. Kavros was lying on, his back, breathing hard. Aurelia was sprawled on top of him. She scrambled off, her hands shaking. "I'm fine," Kavros groaned, sitting up. But he wasn't fine. He was pale, his skin grayish, and he was shivering violently. Alphas ran at 102 degrees Fahrenheit. They didn't shiver. "The magic," Ryan said, touching Kavros's forehead. "He's cold, ice cold. That bastard drained him before you broke the hold." "We need to keep moving," Kavros insisted, trying to stand. His legs buckled. Silas caught him. "We can't go up," Silas said, looking at the ceiling where distant shouting could be heard. "They'll block the exits." "The maintenance tunnels," Kavros gritted out. "Old subway line. It connects to the river." "Can you make it?" Aurelia asked, reaching for him. Kavros flinched away from her hand. The rejection stung worse than the fall. Aurelia froze, hand in midair. "Don't touch me," Kavros whispered. His eyes were wide, fearful. "Not right now." Aurelia pulled her hand back, curling her fingers into a fist. "He knows," she thought. "He knows what I am. He saw me drain the magic." "I can walk," Kavros said to Silas. "Let's go." They moved into the shadows. The sub-basement gave way to rusted iron doors, which Silas forced open with a screech of metal. Beyond lay the forgotten infrastructure of the city, tunnels that smelled of damp concrete, rats, and dripping water. They walked for 20 minutes in silence. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a grim, heavy dread. The forced proximity of the tunnel pressed in on them. There was nowhere to run, no audience to perform for. Just the dripping water and the sound of Kavros's deteriorating breathing. "Here," Silas said, kicking open a door to a small electrical substation room. "It's defensible. One entrance. We stop. We stabilize." "We can't stop," Kavros argued, but he was leaning heavily on his brother. "You drop, we all die," Silas said simply. He practically carried Kavros into the room and set him down against a humming generator. The room was tiny, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet. It was cramped, lit only by the green LEDs of the machinery and the tactical light on Ryan's vest. Ryan slammed the heavy iron door shut and jammed a steel pipe through the handle. "Sealed," Ryan said. He slid down the wall, exhausted. They were trapped, buried 50 feet underground, with a dying alpha and a monster who didn't know how to turn off her hunger. The silence in the room was deafening. Aurelia sat in the farthest corner, hugging her knees. She could feel the hum of the men in the room. Even weakened, they were so full of life. And she felt hollow. The brief surge of energy she'd gotten from the villain's magic had faded, leaving the hunger sharper than before. It was an itch under her skin, a need to reach out, to touch, to fill the void. Kavros was deteriorating fast. His breathing was wet, rattling. "He's going into shock," Silas said, his voice low. He was stripping off his own tactical vest to lay over Kavros. His core temp is dropping. The blood magic disrupted his metabolic regulator. He needs heat, Ryan said. Body heat. Ryan looked at Aurelia. Aurelia looked at Kavros. He was unconscious now, his head lolling to the side. I can't, Aurelia whispered. You heard what that man said. I'm an alpha eater. If I touch him, I might kill him. You saved him upstairs, Ryan argued, crawling over to her. In the small room, his knees brushed hers. You drained the magic, not him. I don't know how to control it, Aurelia cried softly. I feel it, Ryan. It's like a starving animal inside me. If I touch him, I might not stop. Ryan grabbed her face. Aurelia gasped. The contact was electric. She felt a rush of energy flow from him to her, spicy, hot, smoky. It was delicious. She wanted to lean into it. She wanted to devour him. Ryan didn't pull away, even though she saw his eyes widen as he felt the drain. Listen to me, Ryan said, his voice fierce. We are Vanes. We are the strongest alphas in this city. You think a little girl like you can drain us dry? I'm not a little girl, Aurelia whispered. I'm a predator. Good, Ryan smirked, though it looked strained. We like predators. He pulled her up. Kavros is dying, Aurelia. He needs heat. You're his mate. Biology says you can stabilize him. And if I eat his soul instead? Then at least he dies happy, Ryan said grimly. He pushed her toward Kavros. Silas looked up. He didn't look happy about it, but he moved aside, making space on the cold concrete floor. Skin to skin, Silas instructed. It's the only way to transfer the thermal load fast enough. Aurelia's hands shook as she reached for Kavros's shirt. She unbuttoned it, revealing his chest. It was pale, the muscles slack. She shrugged off her torn dress, leaving herself in just her camisole. She lay down beside him on the hard floor. The moment her skin touched his, the hunger roared. It wasn't painful. It was ecstasy. Kavros's skin was cold, but deep down, there was a core of alpha power that flickered like a dying ember. Aurelia pressed her body against his, wrapping her leg over his, sliding her arm across his chest. Her instinct shouted, Take the remaining warmth. Take the heartbeat. Fill the void. She gritted her teeth, squeezing her eyes shut. No. Give. She tried to push the energy back. She tried to remember the feeling of Ryan's hand, the feeling of Silas's protection. She visualized herself not as a black hole, but as a mirror, reflecting their heat back into Kavros. Focus, Aurelia, Ryan whispered. He was right beside them, his hand on her shoulder. Don't take. Share. She buried her face in Kavros's neck. She inhaled. The scent of ozone and winter air was faint, buried under the smell of sickness. Please, she whispered against his skin. Please don't die. I'll pretend for as long as you want. Just wake up. She felt a shift. It wasn't her taking. It was the bond. The tether that had snapped into place in the ballroom suddenly pulled taut. It acted like a siphon. Aurelia felt the hunger invert. Instead of draining Kavros, the bond reached out to Ryan, touching her shoulder, and Silas, touching her ankle. It pulled energy from them, filtered it through Aurelia, and poured it into Kavros. She was a conduit. Whoa, Ryan gasped, swaying. Okay, that's intense. Hold it, Silas grunted. It's working. Look at him. Color was returning to Kavros's cheeks. His shivering slowed. His heart, which had been fluttering weakly, strengthened. Thump, 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 thump. Aurelia lay suspended in the middle of them, a vessel for their combined power. It was intimate in a way sex could never be. She was literally holding their lives in her hands, mixing their souls with hers. The fear melted away. The ghost was gone. In the dark, damp maintenance room, she wasn't invisible. She was the anchor. Minutes passed. The transfer slowed. The alphas were drained, breathing heavy, but Kavros was stable. He was warm. Aurelia didn't move away. She couldn't. She was exhausted, sated, and terrified to break the circle. She rested her head on Kavros's chest, listening to the strong, steady beat of his heart. Then, the rhythm changed. Thump. Thump. Pause. Kavros stiffened under her. Aurelia lifted her head. Kavros's eyes were open. They weren't the warm, liquid gold they had been before. They were dark, pupil-blown, and they were fixed on her with an intensity that stopped her breath. He didn't look grateful. He looked horrified. Aurelia, he rasped, his voice scraping like gravel. I saved you, she whispered, a tentative smile touching her lips. I didn't eat you. I saved you. Kavros didn't smile back. He grabbed her wrist, hard, His grip wasn't a caress, it was a restraint. "You didn't just save me," he said. He looked at Ryan, who was slumped against the wall, looking pale. He looked at Silas, who was rubbing his chest like it ached. "You took from them," Kavros whispered. "You fed on my brothers to heal me." Aurelia pulled back, guilt crashing over her. I had to. It was the only way." "You don't understand," Kavros said, sitting up slowly, still gripping her wrist. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with a new, terrifying scent. "Omegas don't do that, even strong ones." He pulled her closer until her face was inches from his. "Only an Alpha Prime can siphon power from his pack," Kavros said. The silence in the room was absolute. "You aren't an Omega, Aurelia," Kavros breathed, the realization dawning in his eyes with the force of a catastrophe. "And you aren't an Eater." Aurelia tried to pull away, but he held fast. "What are you saying?" She trembled. Kavros looked at her, really looked at her, seeing the power she had just wielded, the command she had unknowingly exerted over the strongest wolves in the city. He released her wrist and slowly, terrifyingly lowered his head. Not in romance, in submission. "I'm saying," Kavros whispered into the darkness, "that you're the king." Then, the hunger answered. The growl died in the darkness, but the echo lingered in the marrow of their bones. Aurelia clamped her hands over her mouth, backing away until her spine hit the cold, curved wall of the tunnel. Her chest heaved. That sound, it hadn't come from her throat. It had come from her core. It was a sound of absolute, crushing dominance. "Don't," Kavros whispered. He was still on the floor, propped up on his elbows. He didn't try to stand. He couldn't. His alpha instinct, the biological imperative that made him a king in the city, was currently screaming at him to stay down, to bare his throat. "I didn't mean to," Aurelia stammered, tears hot in her eyes. "I don't know what that was." "I do," Silas rumbled. The giant was standing by the door, his shotgun lowered. He wasn't looking at the entrance anymore. He was looking at Aurelia with a mixture of awe and profound fear. "I've only heard that sound once, in the recordings of the old war." "We need to move," Ryan broke the tension. He pushed off the wall, stumbling slightly. He looked pale, drained by the siphoning, but his eyes were sharp. "The man in white, he called you an alpha eater. He wasn't being poetic, Aurelia. He was being literal." "I'm not eating you," Aurelia cried. "You siphoned us," Kavros said, finally forcing himself to sit up. He wiped the sweat from his brow, his hand trembling. "You took our strength to heal me. That is a power that hasn't existed for a century." He looked at her, and for the first time, Aurelia saw the mask of the arrogant triplet alpha crack completely. He looked like a boy who had just realized the monster under the bed was real. "We can't stay here," Kavros said, gritting his teeth as he stood. "The generator is dead. We go to the old station. It's a mile down the track." "And then what?" Aurelia asked, her voice small. "Then," Kavros said, avoiding her eyes, "we open the file." The old station was a relic of a bygone era, a tiled subway platform abandoned 50 years ago, now converted into a secure safe house by the Vane family. It was dusty, lit by flickering emergency bulbs, and smelled of stale air and secrets. Silas secured the perimeter. Ryan collapsed onto a crate, chugging a bottle of water from the emergency cache. Aurelia stood in the center of the platform. She felt radioactive. Kavros walked over to a heavy metal cabinet bolted to the wall. He punched in a code. The lock clicked open. He pulled out a thick leather-bound folder. He threw it onto the rusted table between them. "Read it," Kavros commanded. Then he flinched, correcting himself. "Please, read it." Aurelia stared at the folder. Her hands shook as she reached out. She opened the cover. The first thing she saw was a photo. It was grainy, black and white, taken from a distance. It showed a man holding a baby. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes that looked like black pits. "That's him," Aurelia whispered. "The man in white." "No," Kavros said softly. "The man in white is the scientist standing behind him. The man holding the baby. That's your father." Aurelia looked closer. The man looked terrifyingly familiar. Not because she knew him, but because she had seen his statues in the museums. The statues that had been toppled and smashed 22 years ago. "Voros," she breathed. "The tyrant Alpha." "The Mad King," Ryan corrected from the shadows. His voice was bitter, sharp as glass. "The wolf who started the civil war. The wolf who believed alphas should eat the weak to become gods." Aurelia dropped the file. It hit the table with a slap that sounded like a gunshot. "No," she shook her head. My father was a baker. His name was Arthur. Arthur was a beta sympathizer, Kavros said, his voice devoid of emotion. He was part of the Underground Railroad that smuggled you out of the palace the night the Alliance stormed the gates. He stepped closer, into the circle of light. You are Aurelia Voros, the last blood heir of the tyrant, born with a mutation your father spent decades trying to engineer. Aurelia looked at her hands, the hands that had just healed Kavros, the hands that had siphoned power. The king mutation, Silas said heavily, stepping onto the platform. Female alphas are rare, but a female prime, a queen who commands alphas not through seduction but through dominance? That is what your father wanted, a weapon to rule us all. I'm not a weapon, Aurelia whispered, the room spinning. You have his blood, Ryan spat, standing up. The anger in his scent was sudden, pungent. You have the blood of the man who murdered our parents. Aurelia froze. She looked at the triplets. Suddenly, the distance between them wasn't just physical. It was a chasm of history. Your parents? She asked. Voros executed them, Kavros said quietly. On live television. Because our father refused to kneel. Because he refused to give up his territory to the tyrant. Kavros looked at Aurelia, and the pain in his eyes was a physical weight. We were 8 years old, Aurelia. We watched them die. And tonight I almost died to save the daughter of the monster who did it. The silence that followed was suffocating. Aurelia backed away, feeling the phantom blood on her hands. I didn't know, she choked out. I swear I didn't know. It doesn't matter, Ryan said, turning away. Biology doesn't care about morality. You have the power. That's why the bond formed. Like calls to like. Power calls to power. Is that all it is? Aurelia asked, looking at Kavros. The bond, the pull, is it just his experiment working? Kavros didn't answer. He looked at the file, then at her. Why did you pick me? Aurelia asked, a new horror dawning on her. At the ball. You said you picked me because I was a null. Because I was safe. Kavros stayed silent. Kavros, she pleaded, tell me you didn't know. Kavros closed his eyes. He looked tired, so incredibly tired. I knew there was a rumor, Kavros admitted. I knew the tyrant's daughter might be alive. I knew she was hidden in the city, masked as a null. So you hunted me? No, Kavros opened his eyes. We were looking for you to kill you. Aurelia stopped breathing. We went to the ball to find the anomaly, Kavros said, his voice rough. To find the ghost. We planned to take you, confirm your DNA, and end the bloodline before the hunters could get to you. He took a step toward her, holding his hands up as she flinched. But then I saw you, Kavros whispered, standing by the window, looking so lonely. And I couldn't do it. My wolf wouldn't let me. You were going to kill me, Aurelia repeated, the words tasting like ash. I was going to save my family from yours, Kavros roared, the sudden volume making her jump. Do you have any idea what your father did? He broke the world, Aurelia, and if you really are his daughter, if you really have that hunger... He stopped. He looked at Ryan, who was leaning against the wall, looking sickly pale. He looked at Silas, who was rubbing his chest. You fed on them, Kavros said softly. You drained them, just like he did. Aurelia looked at Ryan. He looked weak. She had done that. She had hurt them. I'm a monster, she whispered. Maybe, Kavros said. He walked over to her. He didn't touch her. He stood just outside her reach, vibrating with tension. But you're the only thing standing between us and the man in white. The architect, Aurelia corrected, remembering the name. He wants you back, Kavros said. He wants his weapon. If he gets you, if he unlocks that hunger fully, you won't just drain 3 alphas. You'll drain the city. Aurelia looked at the tunnel darkness. Then I should leave. I should go far away. You can't, Silas said. The bond. If you leave now, the separation will kill us. You siphoned us, Aurelia. You tied your life force to ours. We are tethered. So I'm your prisoner, she asked bitterly. No, Kavros said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver object. It was a ring, not a wedding ring, a signet ring, the Vane family crest. You're our only hope, Kavros said. We can't fight the architect alone. His magic is too strong, but you can eat magic. He held the ring out. Pretend you're with us, Kavros echoed his words from the ball, but the tone was different now. It wasn't a game. It was a plea. For real this time. Take the lead. Be the king. Aurelia looked at the ring. It was heavy, cold. She reached for it, The moment her finger brushed the silver, the speakers in the old station crackled to life. Touching, the architect's voice filled the cavernous station. Truly, Romeo and Juliet with a side of genocide. The Vane brothers spun around, weapons raised. But there was no target. The voice was coming from everywhere. You think you can hide in my tunnels, children? The architect laughed. I built this system, I built the walls, and Aurelia, I built you. Get out of my head, Aurelia shouted at the speakers. I'm not in your head, darling, the voice purred. I'm in your blood. Did Kavros tell you the whole truth? Did he tell you how you were suppressed for 22 years? Kavros went rigid. Don't listen to him, Aurelia. Did he tell you who cast the spell? The architect continued. Who placed the Null seal on a defenseless infant to make her invisible? Aurelia looked at Kavros. He had gone pale, paler than when he was dying. It wasn't a baker, the architect whispered, and it wasn't me. Aurelia stared at Kavros. The way he knew so much about the Null state, the way he had recognized the ghost quality. Kavros? She asked. Kavros didn't look at her. He looked at the floor. I was 18, Kavros whispered, his voice broken. I was a soldier in the Alliance. We found you in the crib. The order was to kill you. And you didn't, Aurelia said, hope flaring. No, Kavros said. I couldn't. So I did the only thing I could think of. I used an old ritual, a binding ritual. I stripped your scent. I stripped your power. I made you a Null so the Alliance wouldn't sense you. You saved me, Aurelia said. I cursed you, Kavros shouted, tears finally spilling over. I condemned you to a life of invisibility, of loneliness. I did that to you, Aurelia. Every time you were ignored, every time you were mocked. That was me. Aurelia stepped back. The betrayal hit her harder than the truth about her father. Kavros hadn't just found her tonight. He had been the architect of her suffering her entire life. You made me a ghost, she whispered. I wanted you to live, Kavros pleaded. But now the seal is broken. Yes, the architect's voice boomed. The seal is broken, and Kavros forgot one tiny detail about the binding ritual. Didn't you, boy? Kavros looked up at the speakers, terror in his eyes. What detail? Ryan asked sharply. The seal wasn't just a cage, the architect said. It was a fuse. Phase 2 initiated, the architect said. The hunger is no longer voluntary. Aurelia gasped, clutching her chest. The hunger didn't just wake up this time. It exploded. It wasn't a desire to eat, it was a compulsion. A biological command that overrode her brain, her heart, her soul. Her vision turned red. The world narrowed down to 3 heat sources standing in front of her. Kavros, Rian, Silas. They weren't men anymore. They were food. Run! Aurelia wheezed, falling to her knees as her claws, real, obsidian claws, tore through her fingernails. Run! Aurelia, fight it! Kavros yelled, stepping toward her. No! She screamed. She looked up. Her eyes were no longer brown. They were black pits, just like her father's. I can't stop it, she said, her voice distorted, double-layered with a demonic growl. She lunged, not at Kavros, but at Ryan. She pinned the firecaster to the wall before he could blink, her hand clamped over his throat. Ryan didn't fight back. He just looked at her with sad silver eyes. Do it, Ryan whispered. If it saves you, do it. Aurelia opened her mouth. Her fangs descended. But she didn't bite. She leaned in, trembling, fighting the monster in her blood, and whispered the secret that would shatter them all. The hunger isn't for your blood, Ryan, she cried, a single human tear cutting through the monster's mask. It's for your submission. The king has risen. The sound of Ryan's knee hitting the concrete echoed like a gavel strike. In the flickering light of the subway station, the tableau was frozen. Ryan, the firecaster, the charmer, the unshakable alpha, was kneeling. His head was bowed, exposing the vulnerable column of his neck. His hands rested on his thighs, palms up in a gesture of absolute surrender. And Aurelia stood over him. The red haze in her vision didn't vanish, but it shifted. It cooled. The screaming hunger in her blood, the biological imperative to feed, consume, destroy, suddenly quieted. It was replaced by a golden, humming sensation of rightness. She wasn't eating him. She was holding him. Through the invisible tether between them, she felt Ryan's emotions. Not fear, euphoria, a deep, intoxicating relief. For an alpha of his power, the world was a constant noise of responsibility and command. But in this moment, under her dominance, the noise stopped. He was safe. He was held. Aurelia! Kavros's voice broke the silence. It was a whisper, rough with awe. Aurelia blinked. The black pits of her eyes faded, returning to warm brown. She looked down at Ryan. She saw the bruise forming on his neck where her hand had gripped him. She saw the trust in his posture. She gasped, stumbling back. "Oh God," she breathed, staring at her hands. "Ryan, I'm sorry, I didn't." Ryan looked up. His silver eyes were hazy, drunk on the connection. He took a deep breath, shaking his head as if waking from a dream. He didn't look angry. He looked at her like she was the sun and he had been living in a cave. "Don't apologize," Ryan rasped, rubbing his neck. He stood up slowly, swaying slightly. "That was better than breathing." "I hurt you," Aurelia cried, tears spilling over. "I forced you." "You didn't force me," Ryan said softly. He took a step toward her, hands raised to show he wasn't a threat. "My wolf gave it to you, freely. We've been waiting for a king, Aurelia. We just didn't know it was you." "I don't want to be a king." Aurelia backed away until she hit the rusted turnstile. "I want to be normal. I want to be the ghost." "You can't go back," Silas said. The large brother moved from the shadows. He didn't approach her like a predator. He approached her like a devotee approaching an altar. The architect woke the blood. If you don't anchor it, if you don't bond, the hunger will return. And next time, you won't stop at submission. You'll stop his heart. Aurelia looked at them. 3 powerful men, 3 monsters, and she was the biggest monster of all. "I can't stay," she whispered. "I'm a danger to you." "You're the only thing that makes us whole," Kavros said. He walked past Ryan. He walked past Silas. He stopped in front of her. He didn't kneel, but he lowered his eyes, a conscious, deliberate choice to lower his status. "You have to choose, Aurelia," Kavros said. "Run into the dark and let the hunger consume the city, or stay, bond with us. Let us be your battery. Let us be your anchor. And if I drain you dry?" "Then we die serving our queen," Kavros said simply. "There are worse ways to go." They moved to the conductor's office, a small glass-walled room at the end of the platform that offered a semblance of privacy. Silas found a working space heater and plugged it in. The coils glowed orange, casting a warm, intimate light over the dusty space. Aurelia sat on the edge of the old desk, hugging her knees. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving her shaking and cold. Kavros stood by the door, watching the tunnel. He was keeping his distance, punishing himself. "Come here," Aurelia said softly. Kavros stiffened. "I should keep watch." "Silas and Ryan are watching," she said. "Come here, Kavros." It wasn't a command. It was an invitation. Kavros turned slowly. He looked wrecked. The arrogance of the Vane Triplet was gone, stripped away by the revelation of what he had done to her 22 years ago. He walked over and stood before her. He didn't touch her. "Why?" Aurelia asked. "Why did you save me that night? You were a soldier. You had orders." Kavros looked at her, his golden eyes tracing the line of her jaw. "Because I looked into the crib," Kavros whispered, "and you weren't crying. The city was burning, the palace was screaming, but you were just looking at me. You reached out and grabbed my finger." He held up his hand, staring at it. "I felt it then," Kavros admitted. "Just a spark, a tiny, impossible pull. I didn't know it was the bond. I just knew that if I let you die, I would lose the best part of myself." "So you cursed me," Aurelia said, not accusingly, just stating the fact. "I bound your power to hide you," Kavros said, his voice cracking. I thought if you were a Null, no one would look twice. You could have a life, a normal life." "A lonely life," Aurelia corrected. "Yes," Kavros closed his eyes, a tear tracking through the dust on his cheek. "I watched you, you know, from a distance, for years. I saw you sitting alone at lunch. I saw you crying in the gardens. I wanted to go to you. I wanted to break the seal." "Why didn't you?" "Because I was afraid," Kavros opened his eyes. "I was afraid that if I woke you up, the architect would find you. Or worse, that you would hate me for what I am." "What are you?" Aurelia asked. Kavros stepped closer, entering her personal space. The scent of him, ozone, winter air, guilt, wrapped around her. "I'm the man who stole your voice," Kavros whispered. "I'm the reason you were invisible." Aurelia looked at him. She saw the guilt that had been eating him for 2 decades. She realized then that her loneliness had been his burden too. He had carried the secret of her existence like a stone in his chest. She reached out. Her fingers brushed the scar above his eye. "You stole my voice," Aurelia whispered, "but you kept my heart beating." Kavros let out a shuddering breath, leaning into her touch. "You saved me, Kavros," she said firmly. "It wasn't a curse. It was a cocoon. You kept me safe until I was strong enough to survive this." "Are you?" Kavros asked, covering her hand with his. "Are you strong enough?" Aurelia looked at the door where Ryan and Silas stood guard. She looked at the man trembling under her touch. "No," she said honestly. "Not alone." Ryan and Silas entered the room. They felt the shift in the air, the heavy static charge of emotional resolution. "The architect is hacking the tunnel doors," Ryan reported, his voice low. "We have maybe 20 minutes before they breach the station." "It's not enough time to run," Silas said. "We don't run," Aurelia said. She slid off the desk. Her legs were steady now. She looked at the three of them. The strategist, the fire, the stone. "Kavros said we need to bond," Aurelia said. "To anchor the hunger. How do we do it?" The brothers exchanged a look. It was Ryan who spoke, stepping forward with a sad, crooked smile. "Usually, it involves a lot of biting and other activities," Ryan murmured, glancing at the brothers. "But we don't have time for the physical act, and your body can't handle the strain of 3 matings back to back." "So what do we do?" "The old way," Silas rumbled. "The soul tether," Kavros nodded. "It's dangerous. It requires total vulnerability. No walls, no secrets. We open our minds to you. We give you everything." "And what do I give you?" Aurelia asked. "You give us the king," Kavros said. "You claim us, not as lovers, as yours." Aurelia took a deep breath. "Do it." They formed a circle in the small, warm room. Kavros stood in front of her, Rhian to her right, Silas to her left. "Close your eyes," Kavros instructed. "Reach out with the hunger, but don't try to eat. Try to not." Aurelia closed her eyes. She felt the void inside her. It was restless, pacing. She reached out. She felt Ryan first. He felt like a bonfire, crackling, bright, chaotic. She wrapped her mind around his flame. Instead of smothering it, she blew on it. Burn brighter, she thought. Ryan gasped in the room. "Yes!" She felt Silas. He was a mountain, heavy, deep, immovable. She wrapped her mind around his stone. "Be my foundation," she thought. Silas groaned, a low rumble of satisfaction. Then she found Kavros. He was a storm, complex, winding, full of lightning and rain. He was fighting himself, holding back. "Let go," Aurelia commanded in the silence of their minds. "I can't," Kavros's thought echoed back. "I'm not worthy." "I decide what is worthy," Aurelia projected. "I am the king, and I choose you." She slammed her will against his barriers. They shattered. The sensation was blinding. It wasn't just energy, it was memory. She saw herself through their eyes. She saw Ryan admiring her defiance at the ball. She saw Silas wanting to crush the world to keep her safe. And she saw Kavros, 18 years old, looking into a crib with tears in his eyes, promising a baby he would die for her. The connection snapped into you. Place. 4 souls, knotted together into a single, unbreakable braid. The hunger vanished. In its place was power. Limitless, circulating power. She wasn't a drain anymore. She was a circuit. Their strength flowed into her, magnified, and flowed back to them. Aurelia opened her eyes. The room seemed sharper, brighter. She could hear the heartbeat of a rat in the tunnel walls. She could smell the snow melting on the street above, and the men, they were looking at her with absolute, terrifying devotion. "My queen!" Ryan whispered, dropping to one knee again. But this time he was smiling. Silas knelt beside him, bowing his head. Kavros was the last. He looked at her, his golden eyes shining with tears. He took her hand, kissed the knuckles, and slowly, reverently sank to his knees. "We are yours," Kavros vowed, body, blood, and soul. Aurelia stood amidst her kneeling alphas. She didn't feel like a monster. She felt like a shield. She reached out, touching each of their heads, accepting the offering. "And I am yours," she whispered. "Stand up. We have a war to win." They stood together as the sound of the tunnel doors breaching echoed down the track. The fear was gone. In its place was a cold, synchronized purpose. Aurelia could feel Kavros's strategy forming in her mind. She could feel Ryan's fire itching at her fingertips. She could feel Silas's strength bracing her spine. "They're coming," Silas said, racking his shotgun. Let them come, Ryan grinned, his hands lighting up with blue flame. I feel like I could burn the whole city down. Focus, Kavros commanded, but his voice was calm, grounded. Aurelia, stay between us. You are the battery. Keep the circuit open. I've got you, Aurelia said. And she meant it. She looked at Kavros. We aren't pretending anymore, are we? Kavros looked at her. The bond between them hummed. A physical, tangible thing. It was beautiful. It was perfect. No, Kavros said softly. This is real. It's the only real thing I've ever known. He leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a hungry kiss, or a desperate one. It was a seal, a promise. For a moment, the world narrowed down to the warmth of his lips, the scratch of his stubble, and the overwhelming love pouring through the bond. Aurelia melted into him, forgetting the architect, forgetting the war. This is it, she thought. This is why I stayed. Kavros pulled back, his forehead resting against hers. He smiled, a true, unguarded smile that made him look breathtaking. I love you, Kavros whispered. Aurelia opened her mouth to say it back, but the words didn't come. Instead, a sharp, high-pitched whine erupted in her skull. It wasn't a sound. It was a signal. Kavros stiffened. His smile vanished. His pupils dilated until the gold was gone, swallowed by black. His muscles locked up, rigid as stone. Kavros, Aurelia whispered, shaking him. Kavros. He didn't answer. He didn't blink. Then his mouth opened. But the voice that came out wasn't Kavros's. It wasn't the voice of the man who loved her. It was smooth, cultured, cold. How sweet! Kavros's mouth moved, but the architect's voice spoke. You forged the bond! You opened the door! Aurelia screamed, backing away, but Ryan and Silas had frozen too. They were statues, puppets on invisible strings. Thank you, daughter, the architect spoke through Kavros, who was crying silent tears he couldn't wipe away. I couldn't enter their minds while their shields were up. But you just invited me in. Aurelia stared in horror. She had done this. She had knotted their souls to hers. And because her blood belonged to the architect, now so did theirs. Kavros's hand moved, not of his own will. He reached for the knife on his belt. His hand was trembling, fighting it, but the architect's control was absolute. He raised the blade to his own throat. Now, the architect purred through Kavros's lips. Come home, Aurelia, or I make him carve your name into his jugular. Then the silence screamed. The drop of blood was bright red against the pale skin of Kavros's throat. It rolled slowly, a ticking clock in liquid form. Aurelia couldn't breathe. She couldn't scream. She was frozen, watching the man she loved hold a knife to his own jugular. Such a delicate thing, free will, the architect said, using Kavros's mouth. The voice was wrong, too smooth, lacking Kavros's gravelly warmth. It was like hearing a violin played with a rusty saw. He's fighting so hard in there, screaming, actually. It's quite loud. Kavros's golden eyes, drowned in black, leaked tears. His hand trembled violently, the blade nicking the skin again. He was trying to stop. He was pouring every ounce of his alpha strength into resisting, but against the blood magic flowing through the bond Aurelia had opened, he was a child fighting a titan. Stop it, Aurelia whispered. Please, just stop. I will, the architect said pleasantly. As soon as you walk out that door, come to me, Aurelia, come take your place. If I come, she choked out. You let them go? Of course, the architect lied. They both knew it was a lie, but Aurelia didn't have a choice. Aurelia, no! Ryan shouted. He was struggling against his own invisible chains, his fire sparking uselessly at his fingertips. He'll kill us anyway. Don't give him the weapon. Silence, the architect commanded. Ryan's jaw snapped shut with an audible click, forced closed by his own muscles. Aurelia looked at Silas, the stone. He was weeping silently, his massive body vibrating with the effort to move, to shield her, to do anything. She looked back at Kavros. The knife pressed deeper. A thin stream of blood began to flow. I'm coming, Aurelia screamed, stepping forward. I'm coming, just let him go. Good girl, the architect purred. Aurelia took a step toward the tunnel exit, then another. With every step away from Kavros, the bond stretched. It hurt, a physical tearing sensation in her chest. Walk out to the tracks, the architect instructed. My men are waiting. Aurelia reached the door. She looked back one last time. The blackness in Kavros's eyes receded for a split second, flashing gold. Run! Kavros gasped, his own voice breaking through for a microsecond. Then the black returned. The architect laughed softly through him. She's not running, Kavros. She's coming home. Aurelia walked out of the conductor's office and onto the dark, abandoned platform. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and rot. At the far end of the tunnel, lights blinded her, floodlights set up by the architect's tactical team. A dozen soldiers in white tactical gear stood waiting, weapons raised. Behind them stood a figure in a pristine white suit, leaning on a silver-headed cane, the architect, her father. Aurelia stopped in the center of the tracks. The space heater's warmth was gone. She was shivering, but not from cold. Release them, Aurelia shouted, her voice echoing off the damp walls. I'm here. The architect smiled. He tapped his cane on the rail. The bond first, he called out. You're still tethered to them. I can feel the static. It's messy. You said you'd let them go. And I will, the architect said reasonably. But I can't have my queen tied to stray dogs. Sever the link, Aurelia. Break it. Aurelia felt the braid of souls in her mind. Kavros's storm, Ryan's fire, Silas's stone. It was the only thing keeping her sane. It was the only warmth she had left. If I break it, it will kill them, she whispered. You said the separation would kill them. Only if you rip it, the architect shrugged. If you reject them, well, they'll survive. Broken, perhaps, but alive. He checked his pocket watch. You have 10 seconds before I make Kavros finish the cut. Aurelia squeezed her eyes shut. She reached into her mind, finding the knot she had tied only minutes ago. The knot of love and trust and devotion. She had to untie it. She had to turn the king power into a blade. She felt Kavros's presence in her mind. He wasn't fighting the architect anymore. He was reaching for her. Aurelia, don't. We'll find another way. There is no other way, she thought back. 5 seconds, the architect counted. Aurelia took a deep breath. She summoned the void, the hunger, the ghost that had defined her for 22 years. She didn't gently untie the knot. She didn't unravel it with love. She imagined a guillotine. I reject you, she screamed into the psychic link. I reject the bond. I reject the Vane Triplets. She brought the blade down. The backlash was a physical explosion. In the conductor's office, the windows blew out. Kavros, Ryan, and Silas collapsed simultaneously. It wasn't just pain. It was the sudden, violent amputation of their souls. They hit the floor, writhing, screaming soundlessly as the connection was severed. The architect's hold on them snapped, not because he let go, but because the bridge he was using, the bond, had been destroyed. Aurelia fell to her knees on the tracks, clutching her chest. She vomited bile. The hollowness that opened up inside her was vast, terrifying, and infinite. The warmth was gone. The love was gone. She was just a Null again. But this time, she knew exactly what she was missing. Beautiful, the architect applauded. 2 white-clad soldiers moved forward, grabbing Aurelia by the arms and hauling her up. She didn't fight. She couldn't. Her legs were jelly. They dragged her toward the light. Wait! The voice was ragged, broken. Aurelia turned her head. Kavros was crawling out of the office. He was covered in glass shards. Blood from his neck stained his shirt. He couldn't stand. He was dragging himself across the dirty tiles by his fingernails. Aurelia, Kavros wheezed. Don't! He looked at her with eyes that were no longer gold or black. They were dull, shattered. The look of a man who had been shown heaven and then cast into hell. Let him go, Aurelia whispered to the architect. Please! He's no threat to you now. No threat? The architect laughed. My dear, he's an alpha who just lost his mate. He's nothing but a threat. He's a rabid dog. The architect raised his hand. The soldiers raised their rifles, aiming at Kavros. No! Aurelia screamed. She thrashed in the soldier's grip, her claws extending instinctively. Give me a reason not to put him down, the architect said coldly. He's coming for you. Look at him. Kavros was still crawling. Aurelia! Come back! Aurelia realized the truth then. As long as Kavros thought she loved him, he would keep coming. He would throw himself at the architect's army until he was dead. His love was his death sentence. To save him, she couldn't just leave him. She had to destroy him. She had to make him stop wanting her. Aurelia stopped fighting the soldiers. She stood up straight. She wiped the bile from her mouth. She summoned the king one last time. Not the bond. That was gone. But the authority. The biological command that forced alphas to listen. Kavros Vane, she said. her voice amplified, echoing down the tunnel with unnatural resonance. Kavros stopped crawling. He looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. "You thought I stayed because I loved you?" Aurelia asked. She infused her voice with every ounce of coldness she possessed. She made herself sound like the monster they feared. "I stayed because I needed a battery. I was hungry, Kavros, and you were convenient." Kavros flinched. It was worse than a physical blow. "No, that's a lie." "Is it?" Aurelia sneered. "I siphoned you dry. I used you to wake up my true power. And now that I have it, why would I need 3 broken soldiers?" She looked at Ryan and Silas, who had stumbled to the doorway, leaning on each other. "You were just food," Aurelia lied. "And I'm done eating." The silence in the station was absolute. The hope in Kavros's eyes died. It didn't just fade, it was extinguished, leaving behind a hollow, haunted darkness that matched Aurelia's own soul. He didn't scream. He didn't rage. He just slumped against the cold tile, defeated. "Smart girl," the architect whispered in Aurelia's ear, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Cruel, but smart." "Let's go," Aurelia said, turning her back on the triplets. "Before I change my mind and finish them off." The soldiers surrounded her. They marched her toward the blinding white light of the tunnel exit. But Aurelia could still hear Kavros's breathing. It was ragged, wet. And then she heard the sound of movement. Scrape, drag, scrape. He was still following. Even after the rejection, even after the lie, he was crawling after her. "Aurelia," Kavros croaked. "I don't believe you." Aurelia's heart shattered into a million pieces. He loved her too much. He was going to get himself killed. She stopped. The architect paused, watching with amusement. "Persistent, isn't he?" Aurelia knew she had one card left to play. The most dangerous one. She turned around. Kavros was 10 feet away. He was bleeding, broken, and beautiful. He reached a hand out toward her. "Aurelia," he whispered. Aurelia looked down at him. She locked away every emotion she had. She became the ice. She became the stone. She drew a deep breath and pushed her alpha voice to its limit. "Kavros Vane," she commanded. Kavros froze, his body locked up against his will. "I command you," Aurelia said, the words tasting like poison. "Stay." Kavros's body went rigid, his hand, reaching for her, stopped in midair. He fought it. His muscles bulged, veins popping in his neck as he tried to break the compulsion. He tried to crawl forward, he tried to scream. But the king's command was absolute. He was trapped in his own body, forced to watch her leave. Aurelia turned back to the architect. "Take me away." The architect offered her his arm. She took it. They walked into the light. Behind them, in the darkness of the abandoned station, there was no sound of movement, no footsteps, no chase. There was only the sound of a grown man sobbing, paralyzed on the floor, unable to move a muscle to wipe his own tears. Aurelia walked into the blinding snow, the heavy steel door of the architect's transport waiting. She stepped inside. The door began to close. Through the narrowing gap, she saw the dark tunnel one last time. She expected silence. She expected Kavros to be broken. But then, a sound echoed from the darkness, low, vibrating, primal. It wasn't a sob anymore. It was a growl. Kavros's voice cut through the distance, no longer weak, no longer pleading. It was the sound of an alpha who had lost everything and found only rage. "Run, Aurelia!" Kavros's voice promised from the dark, shattering the command she had placed on him through sheer force of will. "Because when I find you, I won't be coming to save you." The steel door slams shut with a deafening boom. Then, silence. The architect's stronghold wasn't a dungeon. It was a broadcasting station. Aurelia sat in the center of the room, strapped into a chair that looked less like furniture and more like a medical instrument. It was chrome and white leather, reclining slightly, with thick bundles of cables running from the base into the floor. Electrodes were pasted to her temples. A silver collar, lined with needles that pricked her skin, was fastened around her throat. "Comfortable?" the architect asked. He was adjusting a dial on a massive console wall that hummed with enough electricity to power a city block. "Go to hell," Aurelia whispered. Her voice sounded strange, tinny, echoing. The collar picked up the vibration of her vocal cords and amplified it. "Not yet," the architect smiled, turning to face her. "We have work to do. Do you know what this place is, Aurelia?" She looked around. The room was circular, glass-walled, overlooking the entire snow-swept city. A massive transmission tower spiked up from the roof above them. "It's an amplifier," the architect explained. My legacy. You see, the Alpha Eater mutation is useless if it only affects one wolf at a time. It's too small, too intimate. He walked over to her, his cane clicking on the pristine floor. But with this, he gestured to the tower. I can take your voice, your specific dominant biofrequency, and broadcast it, not just to the room, to the territory. Aurelia felt the blood drain from her face. You want me to command the city? I want you to bring order, he corrected. Imagine it. No more pack wars, no more territorial disputes. Just one voice, commanding every alpha in the Western Hemisphere to kneel. They won't listen, Aurelia said. The Vanes fought it. The Vanes fought you, the architect said, because you were untrained. You were emotional. But with the machine, your voice will be absolute law. You will say, peace, and every wolf will stop fighting. You will say, serve, and they will enslave themselves. He leaned in, his eyes gleaming with madness. And the first test subject, the architect whispered, pointing to the bank of monitors, is already at the front door. Aurelia looked at the screens. Grainy, black and white footage showed the lobby of the building, or what was left of it. The glass doors were shattered, bodies of white-clad soldiers were strewn across the marble floor, and walking through the carnage, stepping over the corpses without breaking stride, were 3 men. Kavros, Ryan, Silas. They didn't look like heroes, they looked like reapers. Kavros was in the lead, his shirt soaked in blood, his own, and others. He wasn't holding a gun, he was holding a fire axe. He came, Aurelia breathed, a mixture of terror and hope seizing her chest. Of course he came, the architect sneered. He's a dog chasing a car. Now, let's see if we can make him sit. Kavros didn't feel the pain in his broken leg. He didn't feel the cold. He didn't feel the recoil of the axe as he swung it, burying the blade in the chest of a guard who tried to block the stairwell. He felt nothing. Aurelia had severed the bond. She had taken the knife of her rejection and cut the soul tether. The silence in his head was deafening. For an hour he had known what it was like to be whole, to have Ryan's fire and Silas's strength and Aurelia's gravity all mixed in with his own thoughts. Now he was just Kavros. Alone. Empty. Clear, Silas grunted behind him. The giant was limping, one arm hanging uselessly at his side, dislocated in the station blast. He was holding his shotgun one-handed, blasting hinges off doors. Ryan brought up the rear. He wasn't making jokes. His hands were wreathed in blue flame that burned hotter and brighter than Kavros had ever seen. He was burning through his reserves, not caring if he burned himself out. 20th floor, Ryan rasped. The signal is coming from the roof. We don't stop, Kavros said. His voice was a flat, dead thing. Kavros, Silas said, pausing on the landing. If she's up there, if she's turned. She rejected us, Silas, Kavros said, turning to look at his brother. His eyes were dark, devoid of the golden light. She called us food. She left us to die. She lied, Ryan argued, leaning against the railing. She commanded you to stay so you wouldn't crawl after her and get shot. She saved you. Did she? Kavros asked. Or did she just want to make sure she didn't damage her battery? You don't believe that, Ryan spat. It doesn't matter what I believe. Kavros tightened his grip on the axe handle until the wood groaned. She is with the architect. She is the weapon. If we can't get her out... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The pact of the Vane family was simple. Protect the territory, even if it meant cutting out your own heart. If she's the weapon, Silas finished softly, we break the weapon. Kavros looked up the spiraling staircase. He remembered the feel of her skin, the smell of ozone, the way she had looked at him in the vault and promised to stay. Yes, Kavros whispered, we break it. He turned and started climbing. In the tower, the machine woke up. It started as a vibration in the floor, a deep, resonant thrum that rattled Aurelia's teeth. The electrodes on her temples grew hot. The collar around her neck tightened. Phase 1, the architect announced, typing furiously at the console. Synchronization! A jolt of electricity slammed into Aurelia. She screamed, but the sound didn't come out as a scream. The collar caught it, modulated it, and pushed it into the system. On the monitors, the audio waves spiked red. Perfect, the architect murmured. Your distress is pure alpha frequency. It's cutting through the static beautifully. Stop! Aurelia gasped. You're hurting me! I'm tuning you, he corrected. Boom. The heavy steel doors of the control room buckled. The architect didn't look up. "Hold the door," he commanded the remaining guards. 4 soldiers took up positions, aiming assault rifles at the dented metal. Boom. A blue line of fire cut through the steel like a welding torch. The metal glowed cherry red, then white hot. Crash. Silas kicked the door in. It flew off its hinges, crushing one of the guards instantly. The Vane Triplets stormed the room. They were a whirlwind of violence. Ryan threw a fireball that incinerated 2 guards before they could pull their triggers. Silas took 3 bullets to the chest armor and didn't even flinch, clubbing the shooter with the butt of his gun. Kavros moved through the chaos like a phantom. He ducked under a spray of gunfire, swung the axe, and silenced the last guard. It took 10 seconds. Then, the room was quiet, save for the hum of the machine and the ragged breathing of the brothers. Kavros stood in the center of the carnage. He looked at the architect, who was standing calmly behind the console. Then Kavros looked at Aurelia. She was trapped in the chair, wires protruding from her skin, her eyes wide with terror. She looked small, fragile, and Kavros looked hateful. He didn't run to her. He didn't call her name. He raised the axe. "Step away from the console," Kavros ordered the architect. "Or what?" The architect smiled. "You'll kill me, and then what? You can't turn the machine off, Kavros. It's keyed to her heartbeat. If you stop the machine, you stop her heart." Kavros's eyes flickered to Aurelia. "Is that true?" "Kavros," Aurelia whispered. The caller amplified her whisper into a boom that shook the glass walls. "Don't listen to him." "It's true," the architect said. "She is the circuit now. The only way to stop the broadcast is to break the transmitter." He pointed a finger at Aurelia. Kavros stared at her. He saw the wires. He saw the power building in the tower. He knew what she was capable of. He knew that if the architect pushed the button, Aurelia's voice would enslave every wolf in the territory. "Kavros," Ryan warned, stepping forward, his hands smoking. "Don't do it." "She's a threat," Kavros said, his voice cold. "She's the ultimate threat." "I am," Aurelia cried, tears streaming down her face. "Kavros, he's right. You have to stop it. Kill me." "See?" The architect laughed. "She wants it. She knows what she is. She's a monster, Kavros, just like her father." Kavros looked at the architect. Then he looked at Aurelia. The choice hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Duty or love? The territory or the mate? Kavros lowered the axe. "No," Kavros said. He looked at the architect. "She's not a monster," Kavros said softly. "She's my king." He dropped the axe. It clattered to the floor. "And I don't kill kings," Kavros whispered. "I serve them." Kavros fell to his knees, not in defeat, in prayer. "Rian! Silas!" Kavros commanded without looking back. "Kneel!" Ryan hesitated for a split second, then dropped. Silas followed, the floor shaking as his knees hit the tiles. The architect blinked, his smile faltering. "What are you doing? This is pathetic!" "Aurelia!" Kavros shouted, looking straight at her. "We are open! The bond is gone, but the submission remains. Take it!" "What?" Aurelia gasped. "Take us!" Kavros roared. "Siphon us! Don't use the machine's power. Use ours." "If I do that," Aurelia stammered, "I might kill you." "Then we die!" Kavros yelled. "Choose, Aurelia! Be the victim or be the queen. Take the power." The architect realized too late what was happening. "No!" he shouted, reaching for the execute lever on the console. "Now!" Kavros screamed. Aurelia closed her eyes. She didn't reach for the machine. She didn't reach for the architect's dirty electricity. She reached for the 3 men kneeling in the blood and glass before her. She found the frayed ends of the bond she had severed. They were raw, bleeding and open. She grabbed them. She didn't tie a knot this time. She fused them. "Mine!" The word exploded from her mind. Kavros arched his back, screaming as his energy was ripped from his body. Ryan and Silas cried out in unison. It wasn't a trickle. It was a flood. Aurelia pulled everything they had, their rage, their pain, their love, their life force. She drank it down like starving fire. The machine screamed in protest. The dials redlined. The power surging through Aurelia wasn't the biofrequency the architect had programmed. It was something older, something wilder. The collar around her neck grew hot. White. Hot. Aurelia opened her eyes. They were glowing. Not gold, not silver, not black. They were pure, blinding, white. "Father," Aurelia spoke. The collar didn't amplify her voice. It shattered. The architect stumbled back, shielding his face. "Impossible. The dampeners." You wanted a voice. Aurelia stood up, ripping the leather straps of the chair as if they were wet paper. The wires tore from her skin, sparking and hissing. She didn't bleed. She glowed. She stepped off the platform. The floor tiles cracked under her bare feet. Kavros, Ryan, and Silas were slumped on the floor, pale and gasping, drained to the brink of death. But they were watching her, and they were smiling. Aurelia looked at the architect. You wanted to command the world, she said. Her voice didn't just fill the room, it vibrated in the steel beams. It resonated in the marrow of the architect's bones. The architect tried to speak, but he choked. He grabbed his throat. I am the Alpha Eater, Aurelia whispered, and I am starving. She took a breath. She didn't command him to kneel. She didn't command him to die. She looked at the transmission tower above them, the one connected to every screen, every radio, every speaker in the city. Let's see who's listening, she said. Aurelia reached out and grabbed the main power line of the transmitter with her bare hand. She didn't get shocked. She became the signal. People of the territory, Aurelia said. Her voice didn't just broadcast. It forced itself into the minds of every living wolf within 500 miles. It was an intrusion, a psychic invasion. In the room, the architect fell to his knees, blood pouring from his nose as the pressure of her voice crushed his internal organs. My name is Aurelia Vane, she broadcasted, her eyes locking onto Kavros's terrified, worshipping gaze. She paused. The air in the room sucked inward, a vacuum before the explosion. And I have one simple question for you all. She smiled. It was the smile of a predator who had finally reached the top of the food chain. Who wants to challenge me? The rain has begun. The howl of the city didn't stop. It grew. It wasn't a chaotic noise anymore. It was a chorus, 1,000 wolves acknowledging the new frequency. In the shattered remains of the control room, the air was thick with the smell of melted copper and ozone. Aurelia stood over the architect. The glow in her eyes faded from blinding white to a simmering molten gold. She released the power line. The transmission tower groaned, the metal cooling and contracting with loud pings. The architect, Voros, the tyrant, her father, was curled on the floor. He wasn't dead, but he looked empty. He looked up at her, his eyes wide and vacant. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. You wanted a voice, Aurelia whispered, her own voice rasping with the aftershocks of the broadcast. So I took yours. She hadn't just commanded the city. She had siphoned him. She had eaten the alpha magic that had kept him alive and powerful for decades. You're a Null now, Aurelia said, stepping back. Just like you made me. She turned away. She didn't kill him. She didn't need to. In their world, being powerless was a fate worse than death. She looked at the floor. Kavros, Ryan, and Silas were lying amidst the glass. They were conscious, but barely. Their chests heaved in ragged unison. They were pale, their veins showing blue against their skin, drained of every drop of bioenergy they possessed. Aurelia's heart hammered against her ribs. The king persona cracked. The terrified girl underneath surfaced. Kavros, she gasped, dropping to her knees. She crawled to them, ignoring the glass cutting into her skin. Ryan? Silas? They didn't move. They just watched her. And in their eyes, she didn't see fear. She didn't see regret. She saw worship. Did it work? Ryan whispered, his voice a dry husk. He tried to lift his hand to touch her, but his arm trembled and fell back to the floor. Yes, Aurelia choked out, grabbing his hand and pressing it to her cheek. It worked. You saved me. No, Silas rumbled, his voice barely a vibration in the floorboards. You saved us! Aurelia looked at Kavros. He was the furthest away. He was staring at the ceiling, tears leaking from the corners of his eyes. He looked shattered. Kavros, she whispered, reaching for him. He flinched, not from pain, from unworthiness. Don't, Kavros rasped. I'm empty, Aurelia. I have nothing left to give you. I'm not a mate anymore. I'm just a husk. Shut up, Aurelia said, her voice fierce. She crawled over him, straddling his waist. She didn't care about the blood on his shirt or the sweat on his skin. She grabbed his face between her hands. Look at me. Kavros forced his eyes to meet hers. The gold in his irises was dull, faded to a dirty mustard color. You think I stayed for the power? Aurelia asked, shaking him slightly. You think I came back because I needed a battery? You said, Kavros started. I lied, Aurelia cried. I lied to save you. I had to make you stop following me or he was going to kill you. Kavros stared at her, the realization slowly dawning behind the exhaustion. You commanded me to stay. And it broke my heart, she whispered. She leaned down, her forehead resting against his. I didn't stay because I wanted the city, Kavros, she confessed, the words tumbling out. I didn't stay because I wanted to be queen. Why? Kavros breathed. Why did you stay? I cursed you. I made you a ghost for 20 years. Aurelia closed her eyes. The truth was simple. It was human. It was the only thing that mattered. Because, she whispered, even when you broke me, I couldn't stop loving you, because you were the only one who ever saw me. Kavros let out a sound, half sob, half laugh. He reached up, his trembling hands gripping her waist. I thought I lost you, he wept. I thought I lost you to the monster. I am the monster, Aurelia smiled through her tears. But I'm your monster. She looked at Ryan and Silas. They had dragged themselves closer, forming a tight, broken circle around her. We need to fix this, Aurelia said. I took too much. I need to give it back. You can't, Ryan warned weakly. The flow only goes one way. You're an eater. You consume. Watch me, Aurelia said. She didn't use the architect's method. She didn't use force. She remembered the dance, the scent. The moment Kavros had realized she wasn't a Null. You smell like us. She reached deep into the well of power she had stolen, the massive chaotic storm of energy swirling in her chest. It was a mix of her father's tyranny and the Vane's devotion. She filtered it. She purified it. She stripped away the hate and left only the love. She brought her wrist to her mouth. She bit down. The smell of blood filled the small space. It wasn't the metallic tang of violence. It was rich, sweet, like wine and ozone. Drink, Aurelia commanded softly, offering her wrist to Kavros. Kavros hesitated. Aurelia, this is... The mating rite, Silas finished, his eyes widening. The blood exchange. I took your strength, Aurelia said. Now take mine. Kavros looked at her. He saw the resolve in her eyes. He didn't argue. He leaned up and pressed his mouth to her wrist. He drank. The effect was instantaneous. Color rushed back into Kavros's face. His eyes flared. Not just gold, but a brighter, deeper shade than before. The wounds on his neck closed. The exhaustion vanished. He pulled back, gasping, wiping his mouth. He looked reborn. Ryan, Aurelia said, offering the other wrist. Ryan didn't hesitate. He kissed the skin first, then bit gently. Blue fire sparked along his skin as the energy hit his system. He groaned, his head falling back against the floor. Silas, she said. The giant leaned forward. He didn't bite. He lapped the wound Kavros had made, sealing it with his tongue, taking the residual power into himself. His dislocated shoulder popped back into place with a sickening crunch as his muscles regenerated. They sat there in the ruins of the tower, breathing in sync. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full. The bond snapped back into place, but it wasn't the same. It wasn't a tether. It wasn't a leash. It was a web. Aurelia could feel them. Kavros's strategic mind, sharp and clear. Ryan's joy, bright and burning. Silas's peace, deep and grounding. And they could feel her dominance, her fear, her love. You gave it back, Kavros whispered, touching the healed skin of her wrist. You could have kept it all. You could have been a god. I don't want to be a god, Aurelia said, leaning into his touch. I just want to be seen. We see you, Ryan smiled, reaching out to tangle his fingers in her hair. We see everything. You smell different, Silas noted, sniffing the air around her. Do I? Aurelia asked. You don't smell like the storm anymore, Kavros said, leaning in to inhale the scent at her throat. Or the city. He kissed the pulse point. You smell like home. The sun began to rise over the city. The light filtered through the shattered glass, painting the room in hues of pink and gold. The soldiers were gone, fled or surrendered. The architect was unconscious in the corner, a relic of the past. Aurelia stood up. She walked to the edge of the broken window. Below, the city was waking up, but it was different. The pack wars had stopped. The territorial lines had dissolved. They had heard the king's voice. They were waiting for orders. The Vane Triplets stood behind her. They weren't crowding her. They were flanking her. Kavros on her right, Ryan on her left, Silas at her back. They're waiting for you, Kavros said softly. They're waiting for the queen. Aurelia looked down at the snow-covered streets. She felt the weight of the crown she hadn't asked for. The danger wasn't over. The architect was just one man. There were other territories, other alphas who wouldn't kneel so easily. The hunters would return. I don't know how to rule, Aurelia admitted, clutching the railing. You won't be doing it alone, Ryan said, resting his chin on her shoulder. We are the enforcers, Silas promised. You are the will. Kavros stepped up beside her. He took her hand, the one that had held the power line. He interlaced his fingers with hers. Do you remember what I told you at the ball? Kavros asked. When I asked you to dance? Aurelia smiled, a small, genuine smile. You told me to pretend. Yes, Kavros nodded. He looked out at the city, then back at her. His eyes were fierce with a promise that would last a lifetime. But we aren't pretending anymore, Aurelia, he said. This is real. The danger, the power, the love. Aurelia squeezed his hand. She felt the pulse of 3 hearts beating in time with hers. She felt the hunger inside her, not as a void, but as a fire that kept them all warm. She looked at the horizon. The sun hit her face. She wasn't the ghost. She wasn't the Null. She wasn't even just the king. She was Aurelia, Vane, and she was finally, terrifyingly visible. Ready? Kavros asked. Aurelia took a deep breath. She didn't look back at the ruin behind her. She looked forward. No, she whispered, her eyes flashing with that dangerous, beautiful white light one last time. She turned to her alphas, the ghost of a challenge on her lips. Make me. Silence. The wind howled through the broken glass. Then, a sound cut through the dawn. Not a howl, not a growl. A phone ringing. It wasn't coming from the room. It was coming from the architect's pocket. Aurelia froze. The veins stiffened. The architect groaned, shifting on the floor. The phone rang again. Loud, insistent. Aurelia walked over. She reached into her father's pocket and pulled out a sleek, black device. The screen was cracked, but the caller ID was visible. It didn't say unknown. It didn't say hunter. It read, Mother. Aurelia stared at the screen. Her breath hitched. Her mother died in childbirth. That was the story. That was the truth Kavros knew. That was the truth the file held. She looked at Kavros. He looked just as horrified. Aurelia, Kavros warned, don't answer it. But her hand moved on its own. She pressed accept. She put the phone to her ear. Silence. Then a woman's voice, cold, regal, and terrifyingly familiar. Hello, Aurelia, the voice purred. Did you really think the architect was the one in charge? Aurelia looked up. Above the transmission tower, the clouds parted. A massive black shadow eclipsed the sun. She's here,